Well, good morning. Welcome to United Cooperative here at our Beaver Dam location. Just want to take a few minutes to kind of go through with you guys kind of what our SMART program is. It's kind of a new program we launched last year. SMART stands for Soil Management and Rate Technology. But like with any program, you really need to start with the basics. And no matter what size the farm, the field, or the situation you're looking at, we really need to start with an accurately taken soil sample. And part of that philosophy with the SMART program is we really want to look at where we're pulling that sample. In the past, we may have just randomly selected points, record where we take those, and then just push those up the program and say, great, we got a map, let's look at where those data points lie and kind of go from there. Where now, kind of the premise behind SMART is we really want to look ahead a little bit and think, why are we taking these points where we're taking them? If we have some sort of layer to base that off of, ideally we'd like to look at a yield map, and best case scenario we could look at multiple years of yield data, and we push those together and kind of look for trends. And we use a tool, it's a fancy name called yield normalization. Basically all that means is we look for basically where the trends are lower for production versus higher, and then we do what's called is create zones in that field, kind of low, medium, high productions over time. And from there what we do is we place our soil sample points according to those production zones that we've kind of observed in the past. If we don't have yield data, that's fine. We can look at soil types, we can look at in-season imagery. The nice thing is now we're pulling in in-season imagery from multiple sources. We have climate data, we have info coming in from our R7 tool from our partners at Winfield United. So with that being said, once those points are picked, and usually we try and get the agronomist to kind of help us place those points, so we're really not spending any more on the soil sampling program with the grower, but we're really trying to put some thought and effort into placing those points more accurately. Then when we go to take those samples, they will hopefully vet out or give us more information on the dynamics of that field. There's actually a fellow out at Colorado State that's done some work on this, Dr. Kolsa, and he's shown time and time again, if you really put some thought and effort into placing these soil sample points more accurately, you net out a more accurate representation of that field variability. And that's really what we're trying to do, is more accurately represent what's out here and try to give the grower a better picture of the variability in that field. So if he or she wants to manage for that, we can give them a better recommendation versus just trying to say, hey, 50 pounds of DAP, 100 potash, good to go. We can really say, okay, this area of the field, based upon the sample results and production history, this is the rec we're going to give you. Because in today's commodity market, we really want to be as accurate as we can with our recommendations to make each acre as profitable as it can be. And that's one other splinter of the SMART program. We have a little module called Ag Solver where we can make profit maps. So just like you look at a pH or a potassium map of that field, we can look at profitability. So there again, if you have an area with low production capacity, not saying it's a bad area, but we might manage that a little differently to try to increase the profitability of that field, at least get it above break even. So that's the biggest thing with the SMART platform, is we want to take an accurate soil sample that can more accurately represent the dynamics in that field, and then we can manage for that. We really try to look at that as kind of that first stepping stone into the program, and a grower can take as many steps into that platform as they want. We really try to manage each grower's information based upon their needs and desires. It's not a cookie cutter program by any means. We really want that grower to feel each rec is customized to what they need on their operation. What might work for one grower may not work for another. So by getting their information, getting their input based upon their parameters, we really can fine-tune that a lot more accurately. So once those points are chosen, we go out with a rig, a John Deere Gator. It has a Wintex probe in it. We can set the depth correctly. So if it's a conventional till, we might set that 7-8 inches. If it's minimal or reduced till, we might shallow that up a little bit to more accurately represent the fertility in that field. So again, we can adjust sampling depth, not only where we're pulling the samples, but how deep we're going based upon the tillage that exists out on that operation. Once the samples are pulled in, we send them to a state certified lab up in Bondwell, Wisconsin, Ag Source. Get the results back, visit with the grower, go through all the information that's pulled back. Not only are we getting pH, P and K, getting organic matter, calcium, magnesium, and CEC. That cation exchange capacity is kind of unique. It's basically kind of shows you the ability of that soil to hold on to and exchange positive cations, which real simply would be your potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So a sandy soil, if you think of a sponge with really big holes, if you dump a bunch of water, most of that water is going to go through. So a sand would have a low CEC. Whereas the soil in this area would have a higher CEC. There's a little higher clay content, so the sponge in that example would have smaller holes, and you pour that same amount of water on it, less would pass through. So having that information really helps us fine-tune our potassium recs quite a bit. So we feel that's an important piece to have. What we have in front of us here today is one of our soil sample rigs. We have 9 of these in the company, kind of spread throughout our territory. The basic function of this machine is to pull a georeference soil sample out in the field. And by georeference, I mean if you look at the top of this machine, there's a GPS receiver on top. You can tell it's cabled down into the cab. And then the operator would have an iPad in there where he or she would receive their job. And like we talked before, they're going to receive a set of instructions on where to pull the samples in the field. Because back in the mid-90s, we had your basic grid sampling. We've kind of evolved to something called smart sampling, where we put some thought and effort into where we're going to pull these samples ahead of time. We're still taking the same number of samples, but we're just putting a lot more thought and effort into where they're getting pulled. So this iPad, through its data and GPS signal, knows where it is in that field, and it can pull up that prescription, basically saying, okay, you need 12 samples in this field, and it shows, okay, here's sample 1. You're 300 feet to sample, and as you get closer, it basically will start counting down. You're 100 feet away, you're 50 feet, and then as soon as you're within 10 feet, that number changes from yellow to green, being, hey, you're getting real close now. Then you start to slow down, and then you stop the rig, and then when you're ready to start sampling, just before you get to that point, you're going to start taking your cores, because we need minimum of 8 to 10 cores to get a composite sample for that grid point. So basically, the Wintex 1000, as soon as we start getting really close to that point, the sampler will start taking his cores. She'll go down into the soil to that prescribed depth, like we talk about, depending if it's a conventional or no-till will depend the depth that we're going to take. She'll retrieve that soil, dump it in that little receptacle or stainless steel bucket there. And like I say, usually minimum 8 to 10. And then once we get those cores pulled, the operator can then dump that bucket into his sample bag. And what's nice, ahead of time, we can actually have all these bags labeled with a QR code, so that when these samples go to the lab, it's not to say impossible, but next to impossible to mix up where that sample was taken, because we print out these nice little labels ahead of time. It's all kind of set up to go which sample was pulled where with which number. The lab can scan in that submission sheet, and it's brought in. The samples are brought back to us right online. So as soon as the samples are processed, could be 4:20 in the afternoon, they immediately dump back into our software. And what's nice, if the grower subscribes to our smart program, they can get those sample results immediately as well, because they can log in and see that exact same information. So just like you might log into your online bank account and get to see exactly when something is deposited or withdrawn, here the grower can log in and immediately see those soil sample results, even if it's on a Friday night, a Saturday night, because they would have 24 access to their data. That way they can use it whenever they need or want to. So yeah, Wintex 1000, our John Deere Gator. And what's nice too, we've been able to kind of make a few upgrades, because with some later harvests we've had these last couple years, at least our samplers can get out of the wind a little bit now, and we're looking at adding a heat source too, because unfortunately when it gets below 30 degrees, sometimes the iPad doesn't like to retain its charge as well. So to keep the equipment running properly, you see the guys kind of sheltered and bundled up here. Again, it's nice to be out of the weather, but again, also keeps the equipment working a little better as well. There are power sources in the back to basically run the probe. We got some tools and extra equipment in the back as well. But so yeah, the John Deere Gator, our precision sampling tool here at United Cooperative.